Episode 190. Um, I don't have that much to talk about. This week seems like a repeat of last week. Um, the the votes continue to be tallied. I think there are only maybe two states that have a significant number of votes left to count, Maine and New York, or maybe Connecticut. It's just a couple blue states. Biden's lead is 6.29 million in the popular vote. The electoral vote hasn't changed. Trump's lawyers continue to sue in various states. There continue to be some recounts that aren't changing the appreciably changing the vote counts in the states that have done recounts. COVID numbers continue to climb. Uh, Maybe slightly lower at the end of this week because of Thanksgiving and people aren't reporting as much, but everybody thinks that the next couple weeks will be hellacious because of Thanksgiving. That's all I have.
All
Oh,
right.
except a
Well,
book to talk about at some point.
you have a book you want to talk about?
Yeah, but we don't have to
All right.
start.
Well, why don't you talk about the book? Let's throw
Okay,
people some variety here.
okay. This book is called Seven and a Half Lessons About the Brain by Lisa Feldman Barrett, right? Yes. A different Barrett than the Supreme Court justice we are used to hearing about. Um, she's a neuroscientist who likes to talk about her work to lay people. Um, a previous book of hers I read was is called How Emotions Are Made, and she largely believes, based on her research, that emotions are largely a cultural construct. That the base emotions we think we feel are largely, contextualized by our whatever, wherever we grew up. If you grew up in Germany, then, Schadenfreude is one of your basic, or Hollywood, Schadenfreude, which is happiness at another's misfortune, is one of your basic emotions, but elsewhere, not so much. Um, Her main thesis is, and I get the idea that this is an opinion that is shared by a number of neuroscientists, is that the brain's main function is prediction and setting your body up for what comes up next so you not only survive but expend the least resources, because living beings operate on a budget. If a if a big jungle cat spends 2 days stalking, I don't know, an ibex, and doesn't take down the ibex, um, that cat has spent wasted 2 days. All the calories that the cat has spent are not. He doesn't get to eat the calories he lost or she lost because she didn't get the ibex. So now she's in trouble. And that budgeting applies to all evolved beings. And it's Barrett's contention that our brain is set up to make sure we get what we need to survive at a minimal cost to ourselves, which means a lot of stuff, including um, that thinking isn't the main. What are the background noises?
Yeah, it sounds like the director has got a little bar there where he's maybe
Okay.
serving drinks to
Okay. Anyway, so
the people violating curfew,
yeah.
violating COVID
All right.
curfew.
So um, I guess according to this point of view, whether we have quality thoughts or really just an excellent consciousness is of less concern than Um, I mean, your brain wants you to survive to reproduce. Um, and, whether every thought you have is 100% accurate or whether you get to experience deep emotions, um, your brain doesn't care. Evolution doesn't care. Um, that your brain isn't for, it we weren't built for our own pleasure. We were built to pass on our genes. And I'm only, about a quarter of the way through the book, but that's the idea that I get. Um, I know from my own life and from watching, mostly politicians, that your brain can lead you far astray in pursuit of sex, for instance. Um, that we've all seen. We saw Anthony Weiner self-destruct over his need to sext underage girls. He just couldn't stop himself. Or well, that's an excuse. He chose not to stop himself, but that was a disastrous choice for him. And we've seen other people um, in public life usually, because that's. Um, but we're still getting all that background noise. Anyway, so I mean, your brain isn't always your friend.
I think our director has now moved on to eating one of those giant turkey legs
All
in
right,
the
yeah.
background that you see that people get it,
State
and
fairs.
yeah, yeah. Now, what's going on out there, director? Is there a
Okay.
okay? Well, can you pull your mouth away from the microphone? Oh, that's much better.
Okay. All right. Anyway, so that's Science Corner. I'll report more as I read more of the book. 7.5 lessons about the brain. Lisa Feldman Barrett, well written. Um, has one of the greatest things that I love in a book. It's only about 170 pages, so I get credit for reading a whole book, and I don't have to read the 800-page Les Miserables to get credit for reading a book.
Let me just respond. I actually have something to say about this.
Okay.
As some of you guys that really pay attention to the show know, about 8 months ago, I was reading Dr. David Sinclair of Harvard's book, and it's called Lifespan. And the reason I was reading it is because he is experimenting with various chemicals you can take, supplements that will make you live longer and stay younger. And this person is very credible because um, MIT and Harvard have pioneered the study of aging and if it can be reversed. And so this is pretty much cutting edge science, what humanity knows. And anyway, he actually said something similar to your writer, and that is that the body is not developed to live the way we live now. That um, actually the process of repairing the cells and keeping them young only occurs when the body thinks that it's in danger or thinks that the situation is kind of an emergency, um, meaning that you've expended all your energy and you're not getting enough calories. So you were saying earlier that the big cat was had spent 2 days trying to catch the ibex, and it couldn't do it, and so it's in trouble. Well, what Sinclair says is that when a human has been running through the savannah trying to catch an animal or whatever, and it 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 now doesn't have the calories. Or if the human body is very, very cold or very, very hot, that's when the cells begin to repair themselves. The chemicals necessary to repair the damage, it becomes activated. And so that's what resveratrol, trans-resveratrol, was developed for. It simulated the effect of starvation or calorie deprivation in the body, so that the body would activate the chemical that releases the next chemical, which is called a sirtuin, which repairs the DNA and the various, gives energy to the mitochondria, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of the same theory that human beings were built with all kinds of, apparently you're saying the brain and
We've got
also
a
the
big
body,
toolkit, but we can't access that much of it.
because we're not running through the savannah half starving, naked, and freezing. We're
Well,
uh, but but it makes sense in a way. Just let me finish my point, because for so much of human beings' history, hundreds of thousands of years, we were not what we are now. That what the level of comfortable civilization we experience now is really very rare. It's a very small proportion of our time on this planet. Anyway, go ahead.
so what you're saying is, and I agree with it, that um, I guess the deal is when I mean we're fat and happy compared to prehistoric humans, and I
Right,
and so our candle runs we run hot when we're fat and happy. I think evolution has figured, okay, if you're fat and happy, you're probably fucking. You're probably um, in a mode where we can expend some resources because you're probably in a state where you can make babies. Um, as opposed to being starving out on the savannah. So when you go into starvation mode, your body goes into screensaver or low power mode, um, and does more to kind of try to slow down your physical processes and repair some damage so you can survive long enough to eventually get fat and happy and then do some reproducing. So the resveratrol tells your body that it's starving even when it's not, so your body runs more, you burn out less slowly.
no, actually, well, I mean, it's a little
More slowly.
counterintuitive. It's a little counterintuitive. What he says is that you're not, you would think that when you were fat and happy, your cells would say, "Hey, everything's great. Let's start, trying to do better and do better." Well, what happens is, as soon as you're comfortable and you're fat and happy, you're not freezing, you're not starving, your cells say, "Okay, let's stop repairing." They actually do the opposite of what you would think. So it's when you're under that kind of stress, physical stress, that your cells say, "Okay, we need to release the repairing chemicals. We need to start fighting to save the cell." And so that's what we're trying to do with these supplements
Well,
now, is to get the cells to do that even when we don't have to.
yeah,
And
well, the
and
deal is that we know from experiments that just with just about every animal, if you put them on calorie restriction, you only feed them about half the calories that they normally get, they live much longer.
right,
Um, and but it's hard for people to do that because it's very unpleasant to go on calorie restriction. There are some lunatics who do it. Um,
right,
and they get down to like a 5'10" guy might get down to 120 pounds, can't sit on normal chairs because his ass is so bony, but it takes extreme willpower, and we're surrounded by delicious food, and it's very hard to maintain. Um, and what
Well, it's
resveratrol does is it tricks your body into thinking it's being starved, so you get all the benefits of starvation. There's a couple other things. Um, One is if you look at a dog, a short-haired dog, or a horse, um, dogs and horses are ripped. They look like dogs and horses generally look like bodybuilders. You can see all their muscles, right?
right.
Um, they do that without exercise. We've got a dog sleeps, 16 hours, 18, 20 hours a day. Our dog is ripped. It for some reason at some point in evolution, um, the deal where you get to be ripped without exercise, we lost that, and humans have to exercise to be ripped, whereas animals don't. So it's another weird thing about what we evolved to be. Um, and another thing about life extension and trying
Hmm.
to make people live longer, there's been a taboo in researching it for for a long time, and that still exists because if you ask 50 people, would you want to live to 200? 48 of them would say hell no. And then you go, no, live to 200, but in the body of, you never feel like you're older than 60. And people still, 45 of those people out of 50 would say, no, I want to live my time and then I want to pass on, people, because throughout history, we haven't had a chance to try to live longer. There's still, as we move into the era when we can, there's still a taboo against it. I've met researchers into, living longer without curing disease, but they can only do their research. They can only get grants. They can only be looked at as non-lunatics if they say, no, we're doing this research, like in cryonics, for instance, to help cure disease or to
Uh-huh.
stockpile donor organs. There's only one celebrity who's come out and admitted that he's going to get frozen when he dies, and that's Simon Cowell. And he's famously a dick who doesn't care what people think. Um, so there are little pockets of people researching anti-aging strategies, but it's still there's still a taboo to it. So the research that could be going on the more could be going on if it weren't like still kind of a thought of as gross and weird. I mean, we can pretty
Yeah.
much
Well,
billionaires,
what
net billionaires like Elon
what
Musk are have are have established their own labs here and there to do it, but they don't talk about it. Because again, society's like, yeah, that's gross.
well, one of the things that Sinclair talks about is that you have to make it clear to people you will live longer and you'll be healthier. You won't just be a desiccated, mummy sitting there in a wheelchair. That's the first thing. The second thing is, he said it was a difficult thing. This, he backs you up, trying to convince people that everybody thinks, well, when you get older, you're more susceptible to cancer and heart disease, which kills you. Well, what if you could say, well, the real problem is getting older. That's the disease that leaves you open to cancer and heart disease, which kills you. So if you could attack the ultimate disease, which is aging, and treat aging as a disease, then everything would be different. And so the scientific community has finally begun to see aging as the disease. But that's the cutting edge. But the problem is that nobody thought that you could extend life, that you could do anything about aging. And he said something very interesting, which sort of oriented me toward it. He said, look, even if you believe there was nothing you could do about aging, think about it this way. Don't we live longer than our parents and our grandparents who lived longer than their grandparents and parents? So we're already extending the average lifespan anyway, just by, I don't know, better medicine and nutrition and diet and exercise. So we are advancing against aging, but now the question is, what can we do about aging just from our knowledge of the cells? You know, really getting into the actual mechanisms that cause aging. And so
Yeah, because
that's
most
why
of
I'm
the
on this.
most of the shitty stuff that goes on with aging happens within the cells themselves.
Precisely. Yeah. So now he's saying that, okay, fine. We've known for some time that if you don't smoke or drink, don't let yourself get fat, have good diet and exercise, yeah, you'll probably tack on an extra 10-15% of life. But now that we know so much about DNA, which we discovered in the past 30 years, and we know so much more about the chemicals that lead to the decline of the cell, so you actually begin aging from the inside. What can we do about that? And he says it's actually easier to keep a cell from aging than it is to cure cancer. Because really, if he believes that they've discovered what causes aging, what causes the cell to decline. And so now that they know that, it's not that big a deal, he says. You simply replace the chemicals that it's missing, or give the cells different missions by tweaking them, and you can get the cell to stay young longer. Whereas something like cancer, it's a lengthy fight that involves, well,
It's
all the
better not to get
complications that we
cancer than
know
to,
about.
to fight the cancer.
Right. So anyway, that's all I have to say about the cell, but about aging. But let's go back to what you were saying earlier. So you're saying that she maintains that all these emotions are constructs. And I'll tell you why I think that makes sense. Uh, because I've known this my whole life. Uh, because I started studying Chinese philosophy, specifically the I Ching, when I was in my teens. And one of the things that it does is it gets you to stop and think before you get angry. Like that's one of the chief differences, I think, between Western and Eastern philosophy, and that is the Asian, because of Taoism and various, Zen and Confucianism, they have a tradition of more of self-control. So think before you get angry, think before you get upset. And so the average Westerner actually changes by studying these philosophies. It changes his natural emotional makeup. And because as a young man, I think I ran hotter. I think I was more likely to get emotional than I am after my accommodation to Eastern philosophy. And so, to give you an example, there are culturally based emotions. For example, in some cultures, you find your wife in bed with a guy, and you have a right to kill both of them. And in that particular culture, that still exists in isolated places on the planet, they wouldn't put you in jail for that. If you could prove that that's what happened, you'd be considered a normal man. But as we've progressed, we've gotten to the point where, well, you catch your wife in bed, you're supposed to be depressed and leave and call your lawyer and file for divorce.
Well, you
So,
could. I mean, I would think a lot of people would be delighted to find their spouse in bed with somebody else because that gives them a free pass to well, to
right. So,
get out of
but
the relationship or say, well, I get to do stuff too. Um,
right, well, exactly. But I mean, the point is that you are right then and there. You see how society has constructed your emotional response to the situation.
or even
You and
without your spouse banging somebody else, like the love is a really kind of hard to compactly define emotion, but it's easy to see that love, um, is highly dependent on what you've seen in your family and the movies and TV shows that you've consumed. Right now, I
sure.
mean, we're almost in December, and the TV is wall to wall. All of a sudden, Hallmark Christmas movies are not frowned upon. All of a sudden, they're being embraced, um, and just we have a whole nation that is turning to sappy romance,
Hmm. Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's a certain model that is very, kind of localized to Westerners at this point in history. You meet somebody, you spar with them. It's and and eventually you know irritation turns to love.
yeah. And then there are questions about there are all the expectations of love, that come with love. Are you expected to stay in love forever? Science shows that you really only have 2 or 3 months of blissful, that loving feeling. That after that, a lot of it is based on a logical, thought out decision to commit to somebody for a variety of reasons. Um, all right, so I don't have much more to say about this at this time.
I've got a couple more things. One is
Okay, go ahead.
like one of the huge holiday romances is the first lesbian um, kitschy holiday romance. It's got Kristen Stewart. It's got Mackenzie Davis. It's got Dan Levy. It's got a,
I don't
a
know who. I only know Kristen Stewart's the lady from the.
Mary Mary Steenburgen. It's got a huge
Okay,
cast,
all
um,
right.
and the idea that would, but it's plugged into this kind of traditional, holiday Christmas, meet the parents structure. Um,
Uh-huh.
and so, like the culture, I know you don't like it, but the culture is becoming increasingly accommodating to same-sex couples experiencing that model of love. Uh,
Uh-huh.
Also, like without putting up any kind of a fight, um, the culture, within the past 20 years, where it used to be illegal for people of different races to have relationships in a lot of states, well, the redneck states, it was more illegal than other states. Um,
That was like 100 years ago, though. That wasn't 20 years ago. Don't
no,
let
but
people watching this think
it
that
was
that was 20
55
years
years ago. The
ago.
Loving case that went to the Supreme Court was in the mid 60s. But seeing like just seeing interracial couples in movies and commercials, thinking it's odd, for instance, like if you watch a movie like I don't know, probably Love Actually, you can
Uh,
watch that movie. Um, and I haven't watched it recently, but I bet you if you do watch it, you'd be like, "Whoa, this has a lot of white people."
no, actually, Love Actually, all the couples are. There's hardly any one heterosexual white guy with one heterosexual white girl. Almost all of the relationships in that movie are mixed in some way, and it actually was sort of a it was sort of irritating to traditional people to watch that movie.
Okay, well now you're going to get irritated by every movie because every
That's
movie
right.
is very careful to
Yeah, yeah,
unless unless the movie needs to have somebody be white for plot purposes. Say for instance somebody is a like a Rush Limbaugh type radio conservative commentator who has to you know be white for that role, or maybe not. Everybody else is going to, they're going to, we're looking at diversity. And so,
right.
anyway, enough about that. I want to talk one more about my three favorite things you can do to live longer.
Okay.
And I've mentioned it before, but quickly, flossing is good because you know that one of the things that ages you fast is inflammation, your body being pissed off at itself. And in fact, with COVID, what kills a lot of people with COVID is your body goes crazy with the inflammation, the response, and attacks itself. So inflammation is very damaging. And if
It's
you if
called
you've got a
the cytokine storm.
yeah, your body sends out these soldiers. It decides, yeah, we need to fuck up the body because to do a lot of damage to take out this enemy, and we can't worry about what kind of damage we do to it's friendly fire.
Uh,
Um, but if you can deny your body the chance to be inflamed, you can save a lot of wear and tear. And one way to do that is to floss and make sure your teeth aren't filled with guck because you swallow the bacteria that are that are all over your gums, and then that goes into your stomach and into your torso. You're just kind of constantly like swallowing like stuff that's going to inflame the rest of your body. It's why you can't have heart surgery if you've recently um, had like dental work.
wow.
So anyway, flossing helps with that. And
Okay.
then there's this diabetes drug called metformin, which is super cheap. It's one of the most widely prescribed drugs in America, like 60 million prescriptions a year. And it lowers the inflammation response, and it makes your body use insulin more efficiently. And it's a really sloppy drug um, that has a lot of beneficial side effects to besides what it's supposed to do. And
By
then
the way, by the way, Dr. David Sinclair actually takes a gram of that every day.
yeah, I take like I'm not diabetic. I might be a little pre-diabetic, which pisses me off because I shouldn't be. But I take what right now I'm taking what a gram and a half a day roughly.
The only thing is, though, I hear that it actually reduces the effects of exercise,
Yeah,
the
like
good effects
maybe,
of
but like
exercise.
it's I don't know. I haven't noticed. I exercise all the time, and to the point where my exercise is counterproductive. So I don't give
Right.
a fuck. But
All right.
um, and one more thing is this stuff called ficitin, which is a senolytic, which is a fancy term for telling your old cells that should have died and gotten the fuck out of there to die and get the fuck out of there. Um, like when one reason old people are so fucked up is that our bodies become less efficient at clearing cells that have gone to shit, and then the shitty cells um, hang out in your body, only half functioning and irritating your body. So your body gets extra irritated because it has to deal with all these crap cells. Ficitin clears out these crap cells. Um, so your body works more efficiently and with less inflammation. And that stuff, that's an over
Wait.
the counter.
Let me ask you about the ficitin because That's one of the things that Sinclair says is the one of the holy grails. One of the things that if we could stop the senescent cells, the old cells, the they're sort of like zombie cells. They're just sitting there in every one of your organs, making every one of your organs less efficient.
Hmm.
And so you're nothing in you is functioning as well as it was because you've got so many of these old cells that are no longer functioning well, the senescent cells. Now, he says that they haven't quite figured out how to get rid of them. And they're trying something called autophagy, autophagy,
Autophagy.
where, yeah, apparently if you fast a lot, if you can fast a lot, your body will start devouring them or something. I don't know. They go away from
Makes
fasting.
sense.
But who wants to what?
Makes sense.
But right, but I mean people don't want to fast, you know, a
No,
week out of every month to do that. So he says that they haven't quite figured out how to get rid of those cells. Now, you're saying Ficitin does this? It's proven?
Visitant among the, I mean, nothing works great, but among the things that work at all, Ficitin seems to be the best, like easily available thing. Um, like there's supposed to be some combination of quercetin plus some experimental antibiotic that you have to be part of a study to get.
Yeah,
But
that's the problem. You can get the quercetin. I've got it in my refrigerator right now. I take it every day. But you have to combine it with another drug that you can't get.
right. So, but Ficitin works pretty well all by itself. And most of the shit I take, I can't tell whether it's working or not. I know Ficitin works because I don't get up in the middle of the night to piss anymore.
I gotta write this down. Not that I get up in the middle of the night to piss, but let's spell that for our viewers.
I think it's Fisetin.
All right, let's give it a shot. I'll see if it's any
It's
good.
not too
And
expensive. And like, I take mega doses of it. I'll take 2 grams at a time, but I'll mix it with like some lipids because otherwise it gives me vicious diarrhea. Um,
okay, and lipids is just fat, like yogurt or olive oil or something.
like no,
Is
you
that is
mix
that what
like
lipids is?
squeezing, like mix it in with one of the mega, what do you call it, the fish oil pills.
Okay, all right.
Or a
So
vitamin E or
ficitin.
stuff like that, or probably, yeah, olive oil. And then
Okay.
the olive oil will surround the ficitin molecules and it'll get deeper into your digestive system, makes it harder for your digestive system to grab it and take it to the liver, and where the liver just destroys it before it can do any good for you.
Okay, so we're saying you take 2 grams, but probably 1 gram would probably be a good
Yeah, when you
start.
buy a bottle of it, you get 30 um, capsules that are 100 milligrams a piece. So you'd have to take 2/3 of a bottle to take 2 grams of it, or you have to order it special, like from a guy on eBay who sells like a bag of 25 grams of it.
Yeah, but so how much do you take
I take
every
two
day?
grams about once a week.
I see. So you don't do it every day. You do it once a week.
Yeah, because I think it's more effective to, like, if you're doing it to really blow shit out.
Well,
Uh,
that's actually what Sinclair says is that they're looking to clean out the senescent cells, the zombie cells. You don't actually have to take something every day. He says the cutting edge will be you'll go in somewhere for a week and then you won't do it again for a couple years
yeah.
because it doesn't have to be gotten rid of every day.
No,
All
but
right.
yeah, but you don't want to just poke something with, you don't want to poke a senescent cell with a thumbtack. You want to hit it with a hammer.
Right. So you're saying you do 2 grams once a week.
Yeah, but I'm also doing it because, I had the cancer. So it's supposedly effective at certain kinds of cancers. It makes it hard if cancer cells get loose into your body, it
Uh,
reduces the probability that at least certain kinds of cancers can take root elsewhere. So I'm taking the the mega doses to really to like not to I hope you know maybe you know to be a preventative of further cancer.
do you think this
Does
would
it
be good
work?
enough for cancer? Do you think your particular cancer would be affected by it?
There are studies that show that yeah, it's effective against kidney cancer. There's one anecdotal study where this 80-year-old lady in South Korea um, had had an um, colon cancer or something, and she was too frail um, to be operated on, or just didn't want to be operated on, and they hit her with a megadose once a week of Ficitin, and they knocked the tumor shrunk up and eventually kind of became, I don't know, small to the just got really small.
All right,
Um,
very good. All right, so
but
let's
I mean
move
that's just
on.
one lady. But
All right, well, let's move on to another subject. I know that we've sort of trained people to want to know our opinions about the political situation, whether
yeah,
they want to or not. I know that eventually, I know they assume we're going to talk about it.
yeah,
So I've been watching the investigations all week of the election fraud, and I mean I'm obsessed with it. So as I work on my art, I listen to all the hearings, and read I read Sidney Powell, the attorney for the president, for the president's cause. I read her I guess it's the motion to the government of Georgia and Michigan. I mean, I skimmed it. I wouldn't say I gave it, but anyway, the point is that I think the president being President Trump has a good situation right now. I watched our last show, and I said that there were some stirrings in Pennsylvania, and it looks like the stirrings this in the ensuing week have gotten somewhere because what has happened is the Republican assemblies, state assemblies in Pennsylvania and all the other swing states are beginning to rise up, and they are beginning to say, look, as of Sunday night, the for example, the Republicans in the Pennsylvania Assembly are trying to get enough of their colleagues to vote to challenge the certification of the Pennsylvania state election. So what that means is Monday morning, actually, it will be decided tomorrow. They have to get all of the Republicans on board. And so far, they haven't. But maybe that by the time they vote, they will. If the Republicans vote the way the for on the president's side, then they have a variety of legalistic ways of keeping Pennsylvania from giving the 20 electoral votes to Biden. And they're the ones that are serious about it are hopping mad and dead serious. So this was unheard of November the 4th, the day after the election, but now this is where we're at. Um, if Pennsylvania does this, it's more likely that one of the other remaining 6 states will do it too. Now, as you know, if you've done the math, Trump needs to um, neutralize three states that three of the six that are in question. So the states are Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, and then there's the issue of maybe Nevada and Arizona. So that's six, and they're even talking about adding maybe Virginia, but there are those six are all being attacked by the Trump team. And so this is becoming very, very real. I don't know. I was interested in talking about it with you because I don't think that your media is preparing you properly emotionally for what's going on because they're deliberately hiding from all the Democrats I know have no idea of
No, I
what's
see
going
what's
on.
going on, but mostly via Twitter, where there are a lot of tweets from your side that say, "Get ready to cry bitter tears," and that you don't know what's coming, and um, and then yeah, the mainstream media say that all these strategies are are they're not 100% guaranteed to fail, but are likely to fail. Um, and I mean, I remain hopeful that they do fail because, in my mind, um, like they had the guy Trump fired, the head of the cybersecurity task force, on 60 Minutes tonight, and he said,
Oh,
he's like like I tend to like the math of this stuff without really wading deeply into it. But he said one thing that now you've got counter arguments for this, but the one thing he said was for the first time in I don't know how long, 95% of the ballots cast in this election were cast on paper. They have left a paper trail. Compared to 82% in 2016, which means that ballots that actually exist in material form can get counted and recounted, um, which avoids the issue of electronic votes that can be flipped within balloting machines. Like Georgia has, they counted the ballots, and they counted them again, and they've been counted a third time, and every time the tallies, agree with each other within a few dozen votes. Same for the precincts or counties. They counted in, well, wherever they count, they haven't found huge discrepancy. They counted someplace, either Wisconsin or Michigan, and Biden ended up like gaining 112 votes. Not
yeah. I think it's fascinating. Your media has not prepared you for this. Um, so your media is deceiving you by not showing you the evidence on our side. Because you're so far you're saying what someone would say if they didn't know what was going on.
Well, I mean, I've seen some of the evidence, like you guys say that Dominion machines flip millions of votes. And this guy, the guy who was fired, said, well, what that the Dominion machines can only flip electronic votes, but when you have paper ballots, you have the records. Now you can argue that millions of Biden votes were added, actual paper ballots with Biden on them were added clandestinely in the dead of night. And I think that's what your side is arguing, but not really in court. Because when you guys go to court, when you guys go on Fox and Friends or OAN, you talk about massive fraud, but when you argue in court, you talk about irregularities, but you tend less to to, you don't talk as much about fraud because it seems like you haven't brought a lot of proof of fraud to court. Now you'll say, I believe you'll say, that you're waiting to bring it to the Supreme Court.
Actually, no. there are a variety. There are now. I've now read the Sidney Powell's declarations, and I have seen Giuliani's dec. Giuliani gave a talk to the Pennsylvania Assembly, and there are so many different ways that the Democrats defrauded that all of them are listed now. The
Well, hold on,
the
hold on. Is there one place that people can go to see, because that would be convenient whether you believe it or not, to see all the, you said they're all listed now. So where's the list? Is there one website you can go to? Because I'd
well,
like
what
to see that.
well here I mean sometimes these things are so simple and compelling that I feel like if I just sent you the article, it would be interesting for you. There is a very dumbed down article um, that I read. So let me explain the two things that you would go to if you just wanted to know the real absolute arguments that we're making. There was a 2 hour meeting that Giuliani had with the Pennsylvania State Assembly, and you can watch that hearing for 2 hours if you want to while you're doing something else. There is a 105-page uh, brief or declaration, I don't know what the legal, cause of action or whatever, that was sent by Attorney Sidney Powell to to the state of Georgia. That
Well,
hundred
all
and
right, I got a question.
stop talking. The 105 pages is a PDF that's on the internet. You can find it on the internet. It took me about 5 minutes. I just typed in Sidney Powell case to the state of Georgia, the suit, and you can read the actual PDF. In both of these things, you can hear the absolute nuts and bolts. In fact, the one that Sidney Powell wrote, it's 105 pages with 17 pages of technical analysis of the Dominion voting machines, which is, unreadable unless you're an expert in the voting machines. I'm not finished. But there's also, I found a very nice dumbed down article that you could read in about 15 minutes, published in something called The Spectator, which has an online magazine in Britain and the US. And The Spectator lists, I think it's called 30 reasons that Trump is that it's realistic for Trump to be calling fraud, or 30 reasons that the 2020 election could have been fraudulent, and it just lists 30 things that you could read. So now, does that answer your question? You said
I
you
guess
had a
so.
question.
I do have another question. And I'm also, do you ever go and do you ever read our side stuff? Which,
Yeah, yeah, and I'm amazed at how uninformed you are. I mean, it's like there. One of my worries is that I have a sneaking suspicion that you can't get out of this. That we're not going to allow election fraud, and that Trump may win this. And if he does, my only fear is that the Democrats are not prepared for this. You don't know enough. Don't interrupt me. You don't know enough about our side and what's going to start out. What typically you guys are like laughing and making jokes. Whenever I see any analysis by your side, you make fun of Giuliani's hair dye,
it looks
and
crazy.
then
I
and
mean,
then
he
and
doesn't,
then
I
you
mean,
say, yeah, and then you say Sidney Powell is she just looks like a very mean lady, And
Well,
Trump,
the
oh,
question I had about
he's so
Sidney Powell,
dishonest.
is
Uh-huh.
she still working for Trump? Because at some
Oh
point,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I know. That's the other thing is that the Democrats, you're so superficial and ignorant that you concentrate on things like, well, she was fired by Trump. I
well,
mean, doesn't
what
she know
happened
she's not
there? What
working for him?
happened?
Well, I'll explain it to you if you want, but don't smile confidently and say, because all the dumb Democrats on the internet are going, ha ha ha, she's not working for Trump anymore. They have division among their ranks. They can't win because the Democrats have nothing but ad hominem. So for our viewers,
Well, ad
one of the
hominem is that's what Twitter's for, is for ad hominem.
okay, so one of the things that the Greeks used when they were developing logical argumentation in the classical era of Greece was to say that an argument that depends on criticizing your opponent's character or physical appearance, as the Democrats do these days, it doesn't matter. But what matters is the facts of the person's argument. And so all you guys have is these petty, superficial things. But the reason that Powell and Giuliani split is because they are approaching the case from two different directions, and you can't combine them very well. What Giuliani wants to do is say, look, in a lot of these states, the Democrats literally weeks before the election changed the rules of the election. And they did it in such a way that was so outrageous that the Republicans tried to stop them, particularly in Pennsylvania. The Republicans actually took the case to the Supreme Court saying, look, you can't change the rules weeks from the election. So don't interrupt me.
All right.
Don't interrupt me. Don't interrupt me. So in Pennsylvania, for example, and other places, Giuliani wants to take a very practical approach and say, look, you know, the 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 Democrats used unconstitutional methods to change the election rules in some of these states. And you may not believe there was fraud, but it's in the Constitution that you can't do that. And so that should be a slam dunk for the Supreme Court to say, wait a minute, the Superior Court, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania cannot change the election rules. All the rules are carried out by the Pennsylvania legislature. So that's just wrong. You just can't do it.
So, but you guys are
Here,
trying.
I'm not done. I'm not finished. And then Giuliani wants to say, and also we have some other examples of dead people voting, people double voting, that is voting in two different states at the same time. We have election workers that were not permitted to watch the counting, which is also against the law in every one of these states. You have to let a representative from both parties watch the counting. And so that's the approach that Giuliani wants to do. What Sidney Powell wants to do would ultimately, am I putting you to sleep, Rick? All right. What Sidney, I'll finish it real quickly. What Sidney Powell wants to do is actually causing some trouble because it might end up attacking certain elected officials of the Republican Party. She's actually suing certain Republicans, like the governor of Georgia is coming under her assault. And she had to do that, which probably didn't sit well with Trump, even though he's mad at the governor of Georgia. But the other thing she wanted to do was she wanted to go after the Dominion voting machines, which is a very lengthy and elaborate thing that affects all the elections in the United States and the world. So that could take years. And the third thing she wants to do is she
Instance is Well, throw out those votes, but don't throw out all, 7 or 8 million votes cast in Pennsylvania. But I have another thing, which is, all right, so we're back. We ran out of hard drive space, and our director had to reformat some stuff to get more space. Um,
Yeah, and I would like to say it was at a point where Rick was beginning to disgrace our whole conversation, so it was good timing on God's part.
but I'm still going to disgrace our conversation. But first, I'm going to do a plug for our director. Now, our director is supposed to remain anonymous, but our director is one of the finest directors I've ever worked with. Um, eh, our director's directed like 8 movies and dozens of music videos and just a lot of stuff. And if you need to shoot something and you would like you know, it to be shot by somebody who really knows what they're doing, um, if in all aspects of production, but in front of the camera, behind the camera, editing, writing, our director couldn't be better. And get in touch with us, and we will put you in touch with our director. All right, enough of that. Now, um, I think what happened with Giuliani is some time demands plus the COVID forced him. He thought he could dye his own hair. I'm sure he goes to a guy to get it dyed, and to a salon, and he's like, well, I mean, how hard could it be? And it turned out to be a little harder than he thought. But I will tell you, I dye my hair every once in a while. If I need to, take 10 years off my age, I will get in there um, and throw some Just for Men in there. But the key to dyeing your hair and not looking like an idiot is do not turn all your hair black. Leave gray in there. If you're beyond a certain age and you go out now, Lance, you're lucky. You have very little gray. But somebody like me who's very gray, if I suddenly go all black, even to, it's not that people who know me will go, whoa, you must be dyeing your hair. It's the people who don't know me will look at my hair and go, that's an obvious dye job. You look like somebody who's my age, who's out there trying to hook up with sex partners 30 years younger. It's not a good look. But the way to go is to carefully, color your hair so there's gray in believable places. I use a toothbrush, and I start by coloring the places that were the last to go gray. Like down here, the Van Dyke part, the goatee part, stayed black on me longer than this part of my beard. So I'm going to get in here and with the toothbrush, I'm going to hit my mustache. I'm going to hit down here, maybe a little down the sides, and just very lightly with the beard, and then maybe up here. But I'm going to leave quite a bit of gray because otherwise I'm going to look clowny. That's it.
Okay, so I just wanted to ask you a question. Did you know that the FBI was now investigating the vote fraud?
I've heard about it, but I didn't read about. I saw tweets to that effect, but was like, okay, whatever.
Okay.
I mean, because you like to say that my media keeps me uninformed, but I like to say that I keep myself uninformed by what I choose to consume. That
So let me tell you, unless you had more to add. Do you have more to add, Rick?
Well, I should just add as a general point that I like I like numbers a lot, and Biden is now up to like 10.5 million more votes than any other winning candidate has ever gotten. And even so, his vote margin, which is now 4% over Trump, is about 2% less than these hundreds and probably thousands of polls predicted. So, Biden underperformed the polls. So the idea that this is close to 160 million Americans voted in this election, which is 22 million more than have voted in any other election in history because COVID forced a bunch of states to open up early voting and vote by mail to avoid hellacious and dangerous lines on voting day. So to me, and according to what I've read, including like analyses of like what you call the vote dumps in the middle of the night, which turned out really not to be. Um, it looks like an entirely believable um, set of election results without the millions of you. Last week you claimed that you thought uh, 12 million votes were flipped to Biden, that he really only got 68 million votes, but instead of the 80 million that he got. And I don't see any persuasive evidence of it.
Okay. So the FBI is investigating the election fraud, and they started in a very practical way. There are two things that they're investigating. Matt Braynard, so if you want to look up this name, Matt Braynard, Braynard, is a statistician. Well, he studies election fraud. And what he did was he started to call up samples of Republicans. And what he found two things. He found that enormous numbers of people were voting in, I'm not saying you have to look him up right now, Rick. I'm just saying for the viewers.
Yeah, well, what it says is Matt Braynard, a key member of Trump's 2016 election staff.
Oh, well, then if just everything he says must be a lie, Rick.
No,
Another
but
ad
everything.
hominem.
But,
I know
all
it's
right,
ad hominem. It's ad hominem, which I explained earlier in our show.
I mean,
Anyway,
he's not exactly a neutral party.
Well, actually, what he is saying is, see, this is how dumb Democrats are. I'm sorry, Rick. I don't want to hurt your feelings, but an argument doesn't depend on the person making it. What it depends on is verifiable facts. Okay? So what Matt Braynard has done is he has called up thousands and thousands of Republicans. Okay? And what he did was he investigated two things. The first thing is how many people voted in two different states. And what he found was that there were thousands and thousands of people from the swing states that voted both in the swing state and the state they now live in. Okay? All of those votes have to be eliminated. Another thing he found was
So hold on. So he called, who did he call? And how did he find all these double votes?
Okay. The votes are actually listed. They're public knowledge. You can actually find the names of who voted. Now, your vote is secret, so we don't know who you voted for. But let's take a swing state, say Wisconsin, okay? I have to cover my hand here for privacy. Okay. Now, supposing somebody is living in a swing state and they vote. Their name is listed on the roll sheets of those who voted in Wisconsin.
Okay.
But if they can find that exact same name of that exact same person in Texas, then they know the person voted twice. And he said that we found thousands of these people voting twice, and they all happen to be Democrats, it turns out. And that's verifiable. It's not an emotion. It has nothing to do with the dye in Giuliani's hair. It is thousands of real people with real names, and they're on the voter rolls. Now, there are two other things he did. He called up Republicans that, and a lot of people won't admit they're Republicans, but among the ones he asked that admitted, he would say, look, did you vote? And they would say, yes, I did. And he would say, well, guess what? We have no record of you voting. And it turns out that thousands and thousands of Republicans were mailing their votes in. And he's got their names, their addresses, and they're willing to sign, I assume, affidavits saying that, yes, it was my belief that I voted and mailed in my vote. And what the Democrats did is they just threw those out, apparently, because they're gone.
Okay.
The other thing that he did, there's a third way that he was able to do this, and he called up Republicans and said, did you receive a ballot that you asked for? Or no. Another thing that he did was he called up Democrats, and he said Democrats that were unlikely to vote. Because there are lists, and if you work for a campaign, and I did decades ago,
Oh, I understand. I understand.
there are lists of people likely to vote, and they make these lists so that people will not waste their time on somebody that hasn't voted and never will. You know, you don't send literature and to those kinds of people. Well, anyway, he called up people that were unlikely to vote and said, "Did you receive a ballot?" And the person would say no. Well, guess what? We found out that you did vote. How do you like that? Apparently somebody voted for you. And all of these people, he has a list of thousands now who experienced one of these three things. Now these are names, dates, and names, addresses. Now it turns out, according to Matt Brainerd, who is given all of his information over the FBI, it amounts to thousands and thousands of people, easily enough to turn some of these states where Biden won by only 10,000. But that's not all. He's been doing this without any help from the FBI or the Justice Department because they're run by Democrats. So
Wait, I thought Bill Barr ran the Justice Department.
well, he has not been able to make any headway with the swamp creature Democrats that are working for him. So the Justice Department takes no interest in this election, and the FBI has not until this morning. And so what he's saying is, I was able to do this with me and, I don't know, my small staff. But if we were actually to project out, if we had a staff of 1,000 people calling up Republicans 8 hours a day, he estimates that they would find hundreds of thousands from the small mathematical sample that he's already discovered, just from picking up the phone and calling, 5,000 Republicans. He's found that the number of Republicans that had their ballots thrown out and the number of Democrats that had someone vote for them without them admitting to have voted, it would end up being hundreds of thousands of votes.
All right, so I'm okay with the FBI investigating this.
Okay, well, so am I.
All right, I've just got one thing to say about, like, a lot of times when it looks like somebody voted in two places, it's people with the same name who aren't the same person. Here's a weird thing. This is always surprising.
Matt Brainerd is aware of that.
I know, but it still happens a lot. Did you know that you don't know this, because how would you? There are 3 Rick Rosners who
I know because you told me.
Okay, well now I'm telling you again that 3 Rick Rosners who have been Los Angeles-based television writer-producers. You'd think it wouldn't be. Hold on. We gotta. All right. Okay, so I was 2 Rick Rosners seems like a lot, but 3 seems just
excessive.
Like crazy, a thing.
I think 1 is excessive.
Yeah.
All right. So anyway, another thing that happened is uh, we now have listed in Detroit, for example, the Democrats were particularly frisky, and Sidney Powell in her declaration has actually listed where they got physically in people's faces if they were Republicans trying to. Uh, Director, can you uh, kind of
It's okay.
control
It's okay.
yourself?
It's
It
okay.
sounds like you're having a date
She's
over
here.
there.
All right.
Anyway, anyway, the Democrat poll people, workers, were very frisky and actually physically threatened and even assaulted Republicans that had the temerity to want to watch the poll counting. They actually, so now that's completely illegal. That's not only is that against the law, but you will serve a long jail term if you do that. Even a Democrat will go to jail. So they're investigating that, but and those are going to be followed up on. So these are not things that you can just laugh about on CNN. It's ha ha that those silly Trump people. They think that if Democrats in Detroit want to threaten physical violence on Republican poll watchers, that's a real thing. Well, no, we've got people signing with signed affidavits who have the names of the people that threatened them and ordered them out. There are even police in Detroit that were dragging Republicans out of the poll watching, out of the poll counting locations so that they couldn't possibly see who voted. In fact, listen to this, Rick. Um, Everybody's talking about Michigan and Pennsylvania, but it turns out that back out west in Arizona and particularly Las Vegas and Nevada, the Democrats were found to have bribed a lot of our Native American brethren into voting for Biden. And that's going to have to be followed up on because you certainly can't buy votes. Even a Democrat could go to jail for buying votes.
All right. So I'm okay with all this stuff being looked at and going to court. I mean, all this stuff has been going to court for weeks now.
Well, no, actually, none of it has.
You
Because
guys have
what,
been to court dozens of times
yeah, I
with,
know.
with
And
piles of affidavits.
Rick,
It's not like, it's not
Rick,
like, look, it's not
Rick,
like,
Rick,
hold on. It's not, you talked, now I get to talk. It's not like what you went to court with 50 times was the
no, it
bad
is. It is.
information, and only now is the good information
No,
coming in.
no,
You keep
no, Rick,
going to court and keep losing in court,
misinformed.
and I have a hard time believing that the information you have now is of higher quality.
Okay, you're misinformed. So here's what has happened so far. And I didn't say this last week because I wasn't clear on it, but now I am clear. What Sidney Powell and Giuliani are presenting is affidavits. Now, those are things that you assert to the court. And what that does is, in a proper court, if the judge is truly impartial, then they hold a trial or a proceeding of some kind. And during that, they have discovery. So, so what happens is, what our side has been doing is saying, look, this is what's happening, and here's the witness statements. But then in discovery, you actually have the witnesses come forward, and you have the math, and you have the actual physical ballots that have been forged. You have all that come out in the discovery phase. But we haven't gotten to the discovery phase in any court. And part of the reason we've been losing is because your side, what they did was they elected judges in Pennsylvania and in Michigan that were wildly partisan. And so they're just throwing out everything. It's true.
Okay,
No, Rick, don't interrupt
the
me.
last judge to throw out a case in Pennsylvania, as you know, was Trump appointed. And
I know it doesn't matter. He threw out the case before there was discovery. He threw it out with prejudice. So nobody was able to actually present the evidence with physical testimony, physical people coming in. And when he did that, the problem for you, Rick, and it may have been a plan, is that drove it to the Supreme Court, where your fate is sealed. Because the Supreme Court, in my opinion, is not going to let you guys get away with it.
All right.
There are two. Well, the director asked me to repeat something that I said last week, and that both Kavanaugh and and Thomas were accused of being sexual perverts by Harris and Biden. And so, and not only that, but Biden is planning to pack the court, which would destroy the Supreme Court. So if I had to bet my house, I would say that you will be badly beaten in the Supreme Court. So
right.
when you hear that these lower courts are rejecting our cases, please don't give yourself confidence. Don't get all happy, because that just means you're going into the Supreme Court.
All right. So we'll find out soon enough, because I think all state voter totals need to be certified this week, and I think
it won't matter.
And I think the electors are supposed to vote on December 8th unless somebody issues a stay. So we're going to find out this week what's going to happen. So let's move on.
No, sorry, Rick. This is topical. I have to stay on it a bit longer. I know it's a painful subject for your side, but I wanted to discuss.
What happened was Biden won a typical. Like his margins are typical. The only thing that's typical is the huge number of people who voted in this election because people were urged to vote early and by mail. So
that
just 112 or so.
Well, that's actually not true, Rick. I'll address that point directly. It turns out that Biden lost vastly more counties than any other Democrat candidate. He did worse than hardly any I don't believe that there was a Democrat that did worse than Biden in the past 10 elections. The only difference, wait, Director, please, let me just make my point. What happened was, your side, now don't go to the internet, let me finish my point, because you need to hear what I have to say, Rick.
I'm listening.
Okay. Biden lost more counties than any Democrat. He had a dismal underperformance everywhere. What happened was, the Democrat corrupt machine controls 5 major cities: Milwaukee, Philadelphia, Detroit, Las Vegas, and Pittsburgh. And in those counties, in those areas, he actually won more. He won almost 98%, and in some counties, 105%. So, Rick, if you could pay attention for a minute, that's why the Republicans are so upset, because a candidate that performed dismally, far worse than Clinton or Obama, had these outrageous, near perfect spikes, near perfect scores, where it was literally almost 100% in the 5 major swing state counties. Nowhere else, not in Florida, not in Iowa Democrat counties, not in Texas Democrat counties, just in Detroit, Philadelphia, Las Vegas, Milwaukee, and Pittsburgh, just in the swing state counties where he needed them.
The New York Times has a county by county swing map It might even be precinct by precinct, but I think it's for counties. And you can look at all of America on this map to see which counties swung which way and by how much. And it actually looks pretty even. That nearly as many counties swung more Trumpward as swung more Bidenward. But in the aggregate, Biden got, he doubled the vote margin of the popular vote margin of Hillary.
Yeah,
He's
I don't think you understand. All right, the director wants to say something. Go ahead.
yeah.
Rick, do you want to repeat the question?
The director says that the optics of trying to cancel these swing state votes are mostly trying to cancel votes cast by African Americans because the big strongholds, the like Detroit, for instance, is a majority African American city. So when you try to cancel Detroit, you're canceling black people's votes, and the director says that the optics of that tend to look bad.
Yeah, well, Rick, it turns out that Trump got a higher percentage of the Hispanic and African American vote than any Republican since the Nixon administration. I think it might have been Gerald Ford that got uh, as many. So Trump, typically for our viewers, a Democrat will get between 90 and 95% of the black vote. It turned out that Biden only got about 85%. So Trump has done very well. Now, it turns out that in the cities that have Democrat machines, Biden overperformed. He got a ratio of votes, 95 to 100% of the entire population of Detroit and Philadelphia, places that have white people in them as well. So he got the level of votes that Saddam Hussein or Putin may have gotten. And that's one of the reasons whereas he didn't do that in any of the other cities that weren't so important. So that's the reason that it looks very suspicious.
All right,
Now, I was trying
that's
to
why.
say something before you interrupted me earlier about Dominion voting machines. And this is Sidney Powell's main argument. This is the most shocking argument. It turns out, according to Sidney Powell's 105-page suit, which has been backed up by a 17-page technical document written by two former members of the CIA, who specialized in computer espionage. These two former members of the CIA, who specialized in computer electoral sabotage, say that the Dominion voting machines were infiltrated by Chinese hackers from Iran and China, and that they had definitely manipulated the vote. Now, you may say, oh, that's all hogwash, Lance, but that's what they're going with. So for our viewers who are not being told this by CNN and ABC, that's how serious this situation is. And that's the most monstrous part of the whole thing. If Sidney Powell is right, then Beijing Biden, who has received millions of dollars from the Chinese through his son, actually was getting votes manipulated by Chinese hackers. And Sidney Powell is not only accusing him of that, but she has witnesses, one of whom has to have his identity hidden, and the other one is an outed member of the CIA. They're both saying we actually tracked it down and it wasn't that hard. They actually found a hacker in the city of Hunan, China, who broke into the machine during the election, and they can prove that.
So wait,
Found
so if they can prove it, they will take this to court, right?
this has been presented 5 days ago to the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. All right.
All
Now
right.
there's
So
more.
all right.
Wait. No, I'm sorry. The Supreme Court of Georgia and Michigan, but there's more. It
But
turns
you know
out.
what? We've been talking.
No,
Look,
no,
we've been
no,
going
no,
for
no.
2 hours.
All right,
So
and then
like you
I'm gonna hang up.
keep. Look,
Wait. I want to finish my one sentence, then I'm gonna hang up. It turns out that one of the main people in charge of Dominion voting is a fella, I forget his name, but he is a member of Chinese intelligence. They've linked him to the Chinese intelligence,
all right. So
and
all this
he's
come out in
and
court.
that's in her presentation to the court.
All
Yes.
right, so we're going to get rulings on all this week, and if there's anything to this stuff, you guys, the tides start turning, and you'll start getting rulings from lower courts, from the Supreme Court, and you know, and I tend to believe that you guys you're getting fed a bunch of hooey, and that you're not going to win in court, but I might cry bitter tears when Trump gets another 4 years. I doubt it. Let's talk about three more quick things. One is COVID is going to get really bad this week. It's been getting bad. It's going to get worse because of Thanksgiving. Two, Biden seems to be appointing like radical socialists to his cabinet. And three, there's talk, and I don't know that about Biden like excusing some of the student loan debt of people who are carrying a lot of student debt. Numbers like forgiving $10,000 of student loan debt. I've heard 50,000. I don't know who's throwing. I think Biden said maybe 10 grand. I think somebody else said maybe 50 grand. But should we talk about that? Is that a reasonable thing to happen? Like people who've paid off their debt are like, fuck you, I paid off my debt. I had to suffer. I had to work 2 jobs. It's not fair. Other people are saying that it would be a boost to the economy. And if you want, give some kind of credits to people who did responsibly pay off, and struggled to pay off their debt. That the more people we help, the better it is for the economy.
No, I think it's another Democrat bribery scheme. They're just going to bribe people that have student debt. But you
Well,
mentioned
hold on.
that.
Let me ask you this then. What about changing? It turns out that a lot of student loans are at usurious rates, that you can't refinance them. That like if people are paying like 8.5% and have already paid more than the principal, but due to interest and fees, they owe more than they started with. What about
Okay,
what
Rick,
about relaxing the rules so people can refinance?
I've got an even better idea, Rick. The root of the problem, we didn't have this problem 40 years ago.
Hmm.
And what happened was the Democrats pushed through all these aid programs to students so they wouldn't have to pay for college. And they got these loans. And what happened was when the colleges saw that, they got the idea, hey, instead of charging students $3,000 a year, why don't we charge them $100,000 a year? So when the colleges saw how dumb the Democrats were, they just kept raising their prices. So in order to quote unquote help young people, the Democrats created the whole problem.
So
All
how do
right?
you fix it? What are you going to do?
You stop giving students loans, and then the colleges have to lower their prices. When I was a kid, you could go to UCLA for maybe 2,000 a year.
I went to school for about 2 grand a year in
Right,
Colorado.
and now it's up to God knows 100, 200,000. Anyway,
No,
the
no,
next thing.
it's 60 or 70,000, but yeah, it's a lot.
Okay. Anyway,
Well,
so
actually,
you
UCLA
mentioned
being a state school is going to be a little less, but yeah, a lot.
well, you mentioned more of Biden's plans, and that actually brings us to something topical. Biden plans to re-enter the accord, the deal they had that the U.S. had with Iran, which allows Iran to create a nuclear bomb. And this week, Trump did something that sort of showed what Trump does. He somehow, by sheer accident, the head of the Iranian nuclear weapons program got himself blown up.
Yep.
So I like the Trump approach. In fact, I heard this week that Trump was just barely dissuaded, and this is true. This was in the New York Times. So I
Wait, I
mean,
thought you didn't trust the New York.
I don't, but my side believes it too. So in other words, both the right and the left agree that Trump was just that close to bombing Iran because it turns out that they've stockpiled 15 times more nuclear material than they need to. So they have a dangerously high amount of nuclear material, and Trump was going to bomb it. I like that. I like that approach because, as you know, since we started this, I've always maintained that you cannot talk a madman out of developing a nuclear bomb if that's what he wants. The only thing you can do is whack him. So I think that Biden's approach of trying to make nice with Iran is going to lead them to getting a nuclear bomb. And I hope, for the sake of humanity, that Trump gets another 4 years so that he can whack Iran and keep them from getting a nuclear bomb.
Okay. Um, Last thing is COVID. I
Well,
mean,
I have something to say about that. It turns out that the numbers are skyrocketing of people that have it, but the actual death rate it's going up, but it's not as bad as it was. It is going up. I won't argue with you about that. But it isn't outrageous like it was in April.
actually, it is.
And
We matched April this
we
past
met,
week.
but it's already beginning to go back down
Well, no,
again.
you can't tell because it's a holiday
Uh,
week and
all right,
you don't know
all right.
who's reporting.
But my point is that everyone agrees, including the CDC, which is meant to keep figures on this, that if you're under 50, your chances of survival if you get it are 99.9%.
Not 99.9. They're 99%. They're not 99.9%.
If you're under 50, it's 99.9.
It's
If you're over 50, as I said last week, you have more like 5 or 6% chance of dying. Depending on the age bracket, the older you get, the higher your chances of dying. But our governor, who is famous for eating in wildly expensive restaurants inside with all his buddies, cheek to cheek, has shut down, has inter, has given a stay-at-home curfew for the city of Los Angeles, whereby you can actually get fined for walking down the beach without a mask. All restaurants and non-essential retail businesses are at 20% capacity. You can't eat inside or outside of a restaurant now, and we have a curfew starting at 10 o'clock, which means that the virus apparently knows that it can come out at 10 and get you. So the governor, who eats at fancy restaurants with his friends indoors, is making the other people, the scum, the deplorables like me, we can't even leave the house after 10 without a good reason, and we can be stopped by the police if we do. We can't walk through a park now without a mask. Now, I just want to say to you, Rick, I hold you personally responsible because you hypochondriac nuts, you Democrats, brought this upon our state. It is your fault and you Democrats' fault for imposing something a dictatorship worse than North Korea on my state, on my city. I am living worse than somebody in North Korea because of your stupidity.
All right.
Because
Enjoy
of
the
a
next.
virus, because of a virus that I have a 99.9% chance of surviving.
You
It,
don't. You're 60 years old. You're not under
okay,
50.
okay, then I can choose to stay at home. My rate might be higher, but everybody under 50, it's 99.9%. And this is all because of Democrat stupidity. Not only is it Democrat stupidity, but it's Democrat hypocrisy because you Democrats at the higher levels are living it up. That governor should be dragged out of the
Yeah, what he did was
gubernatorial
stupid. The
office.
governor had a
No,
deal
it
with.
wasn't stupid. It wasn't stupid because when you're really a dictator, when you're really a dictator, you can make rules for everyone else and then flaunt them in front of everybody. That's how Democrats are. You're hypocrites, you're dictatorial, and you're stupid.
Anyway, the lockdown is for 3 weeks, I think.
I don't care if it's for one day. I am furious at you Democrats. No Republican anywhere in the United States is doing anything like this. Florida is completely unlocked.
Yeah,
Florida, the Republicans believe in the freedoms and the rights that Americans have lived by. The Democrats are beginning to impose socialist and communist behaviors and practices on this country. And if you don't recognize it, it's because you're willfully ignorant.
all right. You want to wrap it up?
Sure.
Okay. Thanks for watching, everybody. Enjoy the
Uh,
next few COVID-y weeks.
Thanks, Rick. Bye.
Bye.